Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Dawn of Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting and your host. So great to see all of you out there. Remember, this is a live stream, so please drop your comments in the chat, ask your questions, give us positive encouragement. We love all of it. And today I am strongly repping women in drones. You can see I've got the colors in the background. We've got our incredible guest, CEO of Women in Drones, Sharon Rossmark, with us today. It's going to be awesome. So, welcome, Sharon.
Hi, Don. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, everybody, we are knee deep in Industry Diversity Month, sponsored kindly by Iris Automation. They're doing incredible things with beyond visual line of sight with their detect and avoid systems. We kicked off this month with the incredible Lori DeMatteis, one of their global vice presidents for sales, marketing, and customer satisfaction. So go back and watch that if you missed it. By the way, all of these podcasts are available on demand on DroneLife TV's YouTube channel. So absolutely check that out if you missed any of them, or go back and rewatch them, because honestly, every time I go back, I learn something new. So let's get started today, though. Yesterday, everybody, if you missed it, I don't know how you could have, because everybody on LinkedIn, it seemed like, was posting up about International Women's Day, which was yesterday, March 8th. And annually, it is every year on March 8th. So special to have Sharon with us, because she and Women in Drones and all of her colleagues are doing so many great things for the industry when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So Sharon, let's go ahead and start talking a little bit about you. You have such a unique background, coming really not from aviation initially, and catching the bug, if you will, catching the drone bug pretty early on, before the industry really took off. So tell us a little about where you're from and kind of how you caught that bug.
Sure. So I like to frame it that I am in a business sense, I'm an entrepreneur, a business executive. And as you know, I'm an FAA Part 107 pilot, international speaker, children's book author, so on and so on and so on, right? But I've worked most of my career in insurance and financial services.
And it was, you had an affiliation with a university, and you by the way, everybody, Sharon was on Clubhouse last week, Drone Law Connections. You can go back and listen to that replay. It was awesome. And all of those are also available on replay. But you mentioned there that you were affiliated with a university, almost doing like a Shark Tank, like kind of project, as a mentor there, watching the students pitch their various projects. And that's when you first really came across drones for the first time.
Yeah, so just to kind of give you the short story on that, hopefully I can make it short. I was sitting on the board at Illinois State University for their College of Business or School of Business, and which, by the way, is my undergrad school. And part of our business meetings when we go back to campus was to have us interact with the students. In this particular case, they had the students actually come into our meeting and talk about a product that they had developed, which was kind of putting us in a position of like Shark Tank, not necessarily to invest in the students, but to really give them feedback in terms of if they were making a pitch for investors and so forth, right? So the students, quite honestly, they're talking to this panel of let's just say more tenured business people or seasoned business people. And I can say that honestly, as they were making their pitch, they checked all the boxes in terms of saying all the right things and presentation and format, but the students were astute enough to know that they really probably needed to do a demonstration in order to help us all understand. Because quite honestly, I can say that while the presentation was hitting all the right notes, I didn't really get the product. The product was drone software for the agricultural community, right? And so they actually concluded their presentation with flying a drone in the classroom. Now, you got to remember, this was like 7 years ago. This was totally foreign to everyone for the most part. And I can honestly say when that drone took off and started spinning around the classroom, and they weren't reckless or anything with it. It hit me, it dawned me. I like to say that I felt like a cartoon character with stars circling his head that had been hit over the head. I got it. I go, oh my God, this is a game changer. I can really see the implications for so many different industries using this type of tool. And so here we are 7 years later.
You know, you said so many things I was cracking up. You said, "Oh, it dawned on me, this is the dawn of drones." I mean, this is what this show is all about, right? But seeing is believing, and I think that's one great example. And we talk so much about education and in the diversity world, right, Sharon? One of your kind of benchmark sayings is, "If you can see me, you can be me." And so whether it's getting those drones out there in kids' hands or getting diverse pilots and giving them visibility so that students and others can see them flying, I think is so critical. So that's probably a great pivot point to talk a little bit about where we are in the industry because you and Women in Drones just put out a really nice piece on your website. By the way, everybody, if you're not a member of Women in Drones, you're missing out. Like you really need to join. It's not an organization for women. It's for everybody, but it's to celebrate and encourage women in this industry. And when I say this, uncrewed aircraft systems, advanced air mobility. So go on the website. You'll see it at the end here. Join now. But one of the things you'll get is access to these incredible articles, all kinds of other things we're going to talk about more later. But you all just put out an article about kind of looking back at 2021 and some of those FAA statistics for pilots. Tell us a little bit about what you learned doing that exercise.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been tracking since the FAA started producing the information as relates to Part 107 is the growth in the number of women in the industry, particularly for the UAS portion of the industry. And what's been really great is to see every year, just as the overall pilot count has grown, so has the number of women. Now, that's not to say that we still don't have a ways to go, but when you think about where we started 6 years ago or 7 years ago, we were at what 200 and well, actually, I think it was just under 1,000, maybe like 800 women that had secured their pilot certificate that first year, and that was actually only August through December. So just just under 800 in 2016, and now we are at 2021 year in numbers, and the FAA numbers show that we are now have exceeded 19,000. That's great numbers and very impressive in terms of a new industry. But when you look at the overall total in terms of percentages, for the same time period, we're still less than 8% of the total number of certificate holders. So we still have room to go, but we can celebrate the fact that we're seeing increased numbers in great volumes every year, year over year growth.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I agree, 8%. And we're just talking the actual registered pilot certificates, Part 107. We're not even talking about the recreational or the, first person view community, which is pretty large community. We don't really have numbers, I think, there, possibly. I don't, because I remember talking to Kevin Morris, the drone guy for the FAA, about even the trust test and, tracking that. And honestly, they're not really tracking that closely. So that's not going to be a ripe area for statistics.
Right.
I would go out on a limb, though, Sharon, and say, I believe in those communities as well. There's going to be probably even smaller percentages than what we're seeing on the certificated pilot side, the Part 107 side. I was just on Ken Herron's Thursday Night Live or TNL show last week, and even he said, "Hey, we've got a lot of dudes out there and not a lot of women." And it's true. And, I had probably the two women that were in the chat reached out to me separately to connect with me, which was really cool. But, he asked a question. I'm going to ask you, why do you think that is? Why do you think it is we're having such challenges increasing the number of women on any side of the fence here when we're talking about the drone industry or drones in general?
Yeah, well, keep in mind it's not specific to drones. It's across all of aviation, and the numbers still bear out. It's about 8 to 9% in total aviation in terms of the number of women holding FAA pilot certificates. So keep that in mind. But I really think from a standpoint of women in this particular sector, it is really understanding uh, the opportunities, seeing where they fit in, knowing how to even get started. I can't tell you with the new member Zoom sessions I've been having the last 2 years, each one says, I'm so glad I found you all. I don't know any other women. I'm so glad to know that there's someone else out there. It is a need to have that collaboration. And if it doesn't exist readily in front of them, it's hard for them to really see that they can be a part of this. Back to, if you can see me, you can be me, right? And
Well,
so,
right. And yeah. And if memory serves, this is kind of why you created Women in Drones, because I believe, I don't want to speak for you, but that early on when you first started getting into the industry, you were looking around the room like at these conferences and thinking, where are the other women and how can we connect? So tell us about the origin of Women in Drones.
sure. So coming out of a legacy industry, and that's what I refer to in terms of insurance and financial services, I know what it's like to have few women, and I also know the importance of women being able to connect and collaborate. So as I was jumping in with both feet into this industry, wanting to educate myself and understand what I needed to know to really find where I could fit, like we all do when you're going into a new role, I started attending industry conferences. In fact, what I found was that there were very few, and most of the time, no women speakers and very few women in attendance. So after attending a few conferences, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to throw up a website. And I said, I can't take credit. I had my web developer put together a website, which was basically then a very basic one pager. This is, hey, if you're going to an industry conference, here's a great opportunity for us all to connect. Give us your information. And so they provided, he put up a website for me that I could connect with other people, which allowed me to then get involved with other women in the industry. And it quickly took off. Within 6 months, I was hearing from people from around the globe.
Well, talk about taking off. I mean, the way your organization has grown over time, in particular, and incredibly during COVID, when we saw a lot. I mean, Sharon, you and I talked about this because for those that don't know, I've been working with Sharon on the Global Awards program, which is her kind of premier, like gemstone program of many that she does as part of Women in Drones. And I just remember in the midst of that, the emails we were sending out were bouncing back. A lot of small companies had closed shop, but yet, this connection, the Women in Drones just continued to grow. So let's talk a little bit about that evolution. Started out with these connections at conferences. It turned into a membership organization that offers so many different things. And we'll talk about Women to Watch. We talked about Women to Watch, by the way, for about 30 minutes in Clubhouse. So we're not going to give it that much air here today, but because there's so much more to talk about. But definitely go back and listen to that, like I said. So tell us kind of about that evolution. What kind of pieces did you start putting in place? And then let's really focus on last year and this kind of exponential growth that we saw in your various programs, including several new ones.
Yeah. So thanks for the opportunity to kind of go back in time a little bit. As you said, we started off with just being a basic a platform for women to connect and say, hey, I'm going to be attending a conference. As time went on, they started wanting to connect more from a business standpoint, particularly globally. Women in other countries were saying they didn't know others in even in their own country. They were looking for resources. And so we just started adding on to the website. So it just started to grow. And what has really come about in terms of the 7 different brands of which we operate under was really as a result of outcry and requests from members in terms of ways that they wanted to engage and information that they wanted.
Now, part of that is you have a jobs board, because I hear all the time from folks in industry the challenge they have populating diverse, their positions with diverse candidates. You mentioned panels, things like this. So let's talk about the jobs board a little bit.
Yeah, so the Career Center was something that we started about a year before the pandemic hit. And it actually started off, as you've indicated, as a jobs board and has now evolved more into what we're referring to as a career center because it actually has a number of resources available to both candidates as well as to employers. But its real intent is to do just that, help employers find connections with women in the industry. And I shouldn't just say women because about 30% of our network includes men, which is what the spelling is. WOMEN means that men are included. Just had to throw that in there.
Sure.
But the Career Center is really designed to do just that, help employers connect with women. The number one request we were getting pre-pandemic when we would be at a conference at a booth was to help us find women that can help them fill their positions, right? And then the number two request was just help us find qualified candidates in general. So, I mean, that for me was already the beginning of the shortage of skilled personnel needed in the industry. But the number of requests for women was just overwhelming. So that was an outgrowth of that. And it's evolved since then into a full blown career center. And just recently, we're in talks now with an organization who's going to provide professional career headhunting services, recruiting services for companies directly. So that's
Awesome.
another way of stepping up the game. So hopefully we'll have more news on that coming in the next 30 days.
Oh, spectacular. So you mentioned kind of these 7 brands or sub brands or lines of effort. The Career Center being one. I assume Women to Watch, Global Award, and related activities is another. So again, I don't want to take up this whole podcast because you and I we could do that
Right,
again.
right.
But just let's briefly talk about why that award's important, what it does, and kind of where we are now and what you hope to see.
So the awards, as you know, we've just wrapped up our 5th year. The awards have evolved over the years, which has been nice because we started off with just wanting to recognize and encourage other women, saying you too can be a part of this growing field. And it started off as an opportunity to recognize women in the industry. It is now grown into a global awards program, which is highly favored and considered one of the top that women can pursue in this industry. And what's really been nice is how serious and how supportive various sponsors have been through the years, including today's sponsor, Iris Automation.
I was just thinking the same thing. You were talking, their logo popped up, for the first time this year, we had sponsors for those awards and we're able to give out micro grants for the very first time. So, that was spectacular. Iris, let's think about this. Iris, Saberwing, Aircraft, Unmanned Safety Institute, Skydio, Fox Fury, and Volatus Aerospace, all sponsored awards this past year. And Sharon, let's just brag for 1 second, culminating in an incredible event at CES 2022. I'm already ahead of myself. 2022, for the first time ever. Having that kind of a global platform just took this whole thing to a whole different level.
Yeah, what made me really proud is how the industry embraced this opportunity and really supported us. And I can't tell you how many people have said, "Hey, great way to promote the industry." So we feel really good about it. And CES has already said, "Yep, we want you back in 2023." So now we're just waiting for all the final details of what our opportunities are going to be with them for 2023.
Well, I can't wait. And by the way, I did write an article for Inside Unmanned Systems magazine about all the honorees. So, Mike, if you wouldn't mind dropping that in the chat so folks can link out to that. It did just drop this week, and I think you'll really enjoy getting to know those honorees a little bit better. I know Vertical Space Magazine, which I'm going to say is maybe one of your third lines of effort. It's an e-magazine for women in drones, has a related but different piece coming out in their next edition. So tell us a little about Vertical Space and kind of what's going on with that magazine that you all publish.
Sure. So Vertical Space was one of our new ideas that came about during the pandemic, and it was just another way to put out communications and help people stay connected. It is published 3 times a year, spring, summer, and fall. The spring issue will be out in the next 2 weeks, and it has just continued to grow also, not only in terms of advertising and sponsorships, but then also the number of articles and information that's available through it.
Okay, so we're up to number three. I'm going to go out on a limb, but this is, by the way, off script. I'm just doing this by memory and what I know about women in drones. So, women in drones Africa, is that maybe, can we call that number four?
Well, not in that order, but yeah, we'll go ahead and talk about that
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Let's
Sure.
talk about it.
We launched that actually February of last year, and that came about as a result of a number of women in Africa who were starting to connect with us and overall looked across their continent and said, "Hey, we want to be a part of this, but we also see some opportunities for us to network here locally in terms of the continent." And initially, it was just going to be start with South Africa, and I asked the women to do some research to really see what are the real opportunities. They took a couple of months, came back with this really detailed report, and actually identified that out of the 50 some odd countries in Africa, almost 50% of them have a plan or strategy to grow their economy around UAS. And so they said, we're seeing an increased number of women come into the African UAS industry. So we just went ahead and launched it across the continent and said we could always break it up and make it smaller pieces if we need to. But we just thought, just like we do everything else with Women in Drones, go big.
Well, absolutely. And, I know Louise Jupp is a big part of that, Kim James out there. And affiliated with that is their weekly fireside chat every Thursday. So if you're not tapped into that, check it out because it's really an intimate setting in a Zoom context where you can engage with some of these women that are doing incredible things in Africa. Not just women, but men too, of course. And really, really cool. So good on you there. I'm going to ask you again off script. Do you have other plans for maybe women in drones blank country in the future?
We have been contacted by some folks in our neighbors to the north, Canada, that are interested in working with us to look at doing a Women in Drones Canada chapter, and not a separate country, but certainly part of the United States. Puerto Rico, we've had some women in Puerto Rico shout out and say, "Hey, we want to get involved." In fact, at one of the industry conferences last year, they sent word via one of their colleagues to make sure that we knew that they were interested. And so we're having conversations with them too. And they were actually featured in the fall issue, some of the women in Puerto Rico. So while not
Oh,
a
I
separate
love
country,
that.
we are looking to support them with a chapter.
Well, that's so exciting. And so let's talk a little bit about some of your other, let's call it initiatives. Your Coffee Connect. I see Desi Eckstein out there. She dials in here quite a bit. We appreciate Desi. She leads your Coffee Connect. That's at Tuesday, every Tuesday. Incredible guest there. Tell us a little bit about how that came about, what that is.
Sure. So Coffee Connect, as you've indicated, is co-hosted with Desi, and her co-host is Kimberly. And they together approached me about a month into the pandemic and say, "Hey, it would be great to have an online platform to help everyone stay connected." And at the time, we thought that this was, of course, with everybody else in March of 2020, that this was only going to be like a 3, 4, maybe 5 month adventure that we could just stay connected online once a week. And here we are 2 years later, and it's still growing strong with plans just to continue to build it out, because as long as people are interested, we have interesting speakers, we've got great topics, the industry is continually evolving. And kudos to Desi and Kim for continuously going out there and just identifying top talent to come and talk to our weekly group.
Yeah, it's really great what they're doing, and love to see more of it. All right, so I think we're kind of up to five things right now. You've got a giant educational effort. The career connections aside, Career Connect. You have an educational effort also that targets the young, much younger crowd. You mentioned you're an author of children's books. Tell us about that educational effort and how that ties into women in drones.
Sure. So part of what our premise and existence is for fueling the pipeline. And we know that that pipeline starts as young as about age 5, so kindergarten. And so we started down the path of saying we need to make sure that young children, but particularly girls, at least have exposure to STEM via drones. Because we just know that we always say, if you want to get a kid's attention, launch a drone. You just
Oh,
they
yeah.
immediately just copy and replace, right?
Especially in
So
the classroom of kindergarten.
exactly. So we started this initiative called Kids with Drones. So again, part of our brand, and it started off with the children's books. As you know, Wendy Erickson and I have co-authored those books, and there's three of them currently, both in English and in Spanish. And the whole premise behind those books are to feature girls. It has boys in it, but primarily girl characters interested in playing with drones, flying drones, learning about drones, everything from how drones are doing good to how drone fits in just in terms of other type of aircraft that's in the industry. So we started there, and what born out of that was increased interest in early reading programs, as well as schools asking us to come out and put on demonstrations and teach kids about drones. Again, and remember, this is all pre-pandemic.
Yep.
But then we started getting calls from organizations like the YWCA and Girl Scouts asking us to come in and put on programming. So as recently as last summer, we actually went out east and put on a full day programming for the Girl Scouts and concluded with showing them how you can use drones for delivery of Girl Scout cookies, which of course
I
was a
was
lot of
just gonna
fun.
say how per I would love not to have to get hounded at Walmart and just have one of those, those Samoas drop right on my front porch.
Exactly. They loved it. The parents love it. So yeah, it's been great. So we've done Girl Scout programs up in Wisconsin, in Utah, as well as in New Jersey.
I love it. I love it. And on the since we're talking about education, I know you've recently engaged in an educational partnership agreement with the Vertical Flight Society. Kind of emphasizing more that large aircraft, advanced air mobility, and so the whole spectrum, small drones up to large, eVTOLs. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with VFS.
Well, as you well know, that program really is, and I wouldn't call it a program, I'd call it an initiative because
Yep.
one, the depth and breadth of the industry impact really makes it something that we can't do this alone. We need to do it together. And it's focused on DEI. It's really about raising up the entire industry and using DEI as a growth strategy. So that's the premise of our partnership. And we know that it's not just across the small UAS arena, it is across all of aviation. So we're starting with them as one of our main partners. They've been great. You know about the survey that we all launched last year. You and Marlene's company and Women in Drones, we all partnered. And Vertical Flight Society was kind enough to sponsor the gift cards that we gave away as part of completing the survey. So that's already off and running for us in terms of the partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. So, backing up a little bit, Danielle McLean is one of their workforce development advisors at VFS. She's doing a great job. They launched the Flight podcast on behalf of Sharon. I was on that podcast, episode number 2, that I think I put it out like last week. They launched it and I put it all over social. So it's also my website, P3 Tech Consulting. Check it out. We talk all about what they're doing, what we're doing, this alliance with VFS and Women in Drones, my company, P3 Tech, and Marlene's, the Diversity Development Network of Canada, or DDNC, and not for profit up there. Let's talk. That's a great segue to talk a little bit about this DEI effort and the industry survey. Obviously, I know about it because I helped launch that with you, Sharon, and we have that executive summary or short report out right now. Full report, super close to being done and ready to launch. Real excited about that. But explain to those that aren't familiar kind of why we did that and what we hope to come out of that.
Sure. So we all know that there's opportunities in terms of improving diversity within aviation. What we didn't know is what exactly were the opportunities within specifically the UAS and AAM arena. So together, our three organizations agreed to launch a survey to really find out and determine what's the benchmark. What is our starting point? Where are we at as an industry? And then hopefully out of that glean what is needed to move forward. So last August, our partnership launched that survey. It ran from the middle of August to early September, and we received well over our expectations. We thought if we could get a couple hundred surveys, that would be a great start, particularly from
Yep.
a benchmark, because we didn't know what the appetite would be for sharing that type of data that was needed. And the
Right.
fact that we got over 1,000 survey responses blew our minds away, right? And
Yeah.
so out of that became an opportunity for us to start taking that information and building out what's going to be needed to support the industry.
Yeah, very exciting. Totally agree. I think it was like 1,082 was the final tally there. And Sharon, we're going to talk more about this. Another thing you're affiliated with is the North Central Texas Council of Governments Know Before You Fly Your Drone workshop. I know you assist with that, Maggie Schuster and Ernest Huffman down there, and all the things, the great things they're doing as a collective group with those monthly webinars on us, usually the first Saturday of the month.
That's
We're going
correct.
to be speaking, April 2nd on that platform about the survey.
That's correct. So you, myself, and Marlene will all be featured on there. The first hour will be you and Marlene talking about the survey, the background, some of the findings. The second hour is planned for me to interview someone that's going to talk about how to go about seeking grants out for diverse candidates and work efforts in that area. And then we'll conclude, as we normally do, with a bit of overview of UAS regulation.
No, it's a great meeting every month. So if you haven't tapped into that, definitely do that. Highly recommended. So Sharon, we're going to talk more about it later. Obviously on the second and beyond. But I think that survey really did validate what we kind of already knew to a certain extent, right? And we saw this in the FA numbers that you mentioned early in this podcast, that there are not a ton of women out there in the industry. And what we saw was it was interesting because we broke it down into specific identity groups too, race groups, LGBTQ, all kinds of different identity groups, and broke down what are, the numbers in your organization and, how about at the leadership level? So those were kind of interesting findings. But what I found to be the most interesting, Sharon, was like I'm going to use the word you used earlier. What was the appetite to change? Not just to respond to the survey, which was spectacular, but this idea of people actually wanting to change. And just spoiler alert, everybody, I'll just tell you, we asked, I think the very last question was something along the lines, if we created a DEI, advisory group, how many of you would want to be a part of that? I mean, almost everybody said yes. I mean, I don't think we could have 1,000 people on there, but just that answer and the fact that anybody that took the time to write that, to answer that survey, which is about 15-minute survey. I mean, it wasn't like 2 seconds, right?
Right.
That's pretty significant, don't you think?
Yes, I think so. And to your point, uh, for me, it wasn't so much that people were checking the boxes. You could tell that they were being thoughtful in their replies and the type of information they were willing to share. So that's what really, for me, brought home that there is an appetite for wanting to address DEI within the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of write-in comments that we got that we'll put in that final report that will be available to folks to access that. But absolutely. So, we're talking about additional education then targeted to some of the things people expressed a desire to see more of. More to follow, crawl, walk, run, right? Got to get the report out first, but keep your eyes peeled, everybody, for that. I feel like that could be 7, but I'm sure I missed some of the other things and maybe added things in, Sharon. So, what are the other brands or lines of effort that we haven't talked about yet that fall under women in drones to help increase diversity, equity, inclusion in the industry?
Well, you've already mentioned one, so that's membership. You've mentioned we didn't talk about drone flight services, but that's kind of a standard in the industry. If you're going to have a drone company, drone flight services is something that most people are offering. But one of the things just stepping back into the education conversation, one that we just announced yesterday as part of our effort around International Women's Day. While everybody else was touting the women in their community or at their corporation, we decided that we would take a different approach and really launch something that we think as we get into what we're calling endemic stage of the pandemic, an opportunity for women to start getting involved in the industry from a hands-on standpoint and finding new career opportunities. So we're partnering with the Center for Robotic Assisted Search and Rescue to offer a 4-day, 3.5, 4-day training program down in Dallas, Texas. I'm sorry, not Dallas, Disaster, Texas, which is just outside of College Station, Texas, where we are introducing female pilots to learn about mission skills and regulations applicable to different type of disasters, and particular working with their local emergency management authorities. And they will go through exercises around active shooter, flooding, and tornadoes. And this is in conjunction with a public safety training that's going on called Interop 22. So our women will actually be flying the missions for the public safety officials that will be going through their training. So it's actually going to be pretty nice. At first, we thought it was just going to be our small group, but what I'm finding out more is that it's actually going to be part of a bigger effort, and we'll be supplying the drone pilots as part of that exercise as they're really going through active shooter, whether they're flying down the street, going through a building, using the drones, they will be controlling the drones for those scenarios.
Wow, that's awesome. And I believe Mike just posted out the link to that for those that want more information to follow up and maybe participate in that. That's incredible. There are so many opportunities. I mean, that's why we actually have one of the Women to Watch Awards dedicated to public safety and public service, because that is a definite sector where drones are just, again, exponentially growing, and to see women more and more involved in that, and even from, even if you're not involved as an EMS or law enforcement or public safety otherwise, there's so many volunteer opportunities as well, when a disaster does strike in the homeland, coordinated efforts. I know that's actually what Chris Todd's organization, the Airborne Incident Response Team, does. He was on the podcast back in November with Charles Werner from Drone Responders, but AIRT, they're like the airborne version of the Cajun Navy, right? They are literally the air equivalent of that, with a drone cadre that goes out and helps during disaster response. So super cool, great opportunity. Thanks for putting that together, Sharon, because I think that's going to be meaningful for so many people. So good on you. What else did I miss?
Oh my God. I don't think we have enough time probably to go through everything, but
Probably not. But well, let me ask you a targeted question. So we know you've got this now, this 4-day educational effort. Hopefully some additional efforts with Vertical Flight Society going forward, me and Marlene, other educational efforts. You mentioned maybe out there, Women in Drones Canada, maybe something different, maybe something additional. What else do you have on tap for 2022 that we can kind of keep our eyes out for and look forward to?
Since you're one that likes breaking news.
Yes.
Yes, right. We're in talks with a young company that is interested in doing a documentary on women in the industry.
Wow.
Yes. So that's one of those stay tunes, but you're the first one to hear about it. I saved that just for you, Dawn, to do breaking news right here.
Good. No, that would be so great, because, Sharon, where we started the whole, if you can see me, you can be me. And, one thing I always say, that's very focused on women, seeing our girls, seeing other women and girls, this idea also that if they can see her, then, they know she can be her. This idea that we want everybody to see these role models out there. And Sharon, you and I talk about this all the time. We talk about it on Clubhouse when we discuss public perception routinely. This idea that we do a great job talking, I said this to Ken, just last week, FUBU, for us, by us. We do a great job talking to ourselves, about ourselves, but a documentary that can kind of break into mainstream media about this would be super significant, because now not only are you educating and being an advocate for drones in general, but also for the fact that women are a big part of the solution to moving this industry forward. So that is super exciting. I cannot wait to hear more.
Yeah, well, just to kind of give you the backstory on that, it actually started off as an outgrowth of another initiative that we're about to launch, which is women of color in the industry, right? And so that's going to be coming out in our spring issue. We'll start there. And the next two issues, we hope to also feature additional women of color, because it's just like everything else that we don't know where everyone is. And so Women in Drones is now becoming kind of the repository for who do you know that's in this? Who do you know that's that? And so it's allowing us to connect individuals and with companies. But out of that came a contact from a young company that's a startup doing documentaries. And they said, we heard about women in drones. We'd like to know a little bit more about what angle could we take. And we said, just go across the board looking at women. In other words, don't make us hidden figures that we find out about us 50 years from now. We
Right.
want our stories told now. And they absolutely love that and felt that that would give them an opportunity to take on an angle about women in UAS and AAM. Because while UAS is now more well known and more widely accepted, AAM is a whole nother animal that, it's probably going to take a few years before more individuals, particularly public perception, really understands it. But we thought,
Yes.
why not start capturing those stories now? So we're working with them to see what that project, how it might shape up and what it looks like. But you heard it here first on Dawn at Dawn. And stay tuned for more.
That's awesome. Super excited about that, really. And Desi is too. She's out there. Wow, I love that breaking news. That's so cool. So we got a couple minutes left. I want to just kind of pick your brain more generically. We've talked so much about women in drones, all the spectacular things you're doing. By the way, at the end, everybody, you'll see the website. So go on there, check it out. It is a website. I think Jason is his name, her webmaster. I always send people to this website as kind of like an exemplar of this is kind of what you want your website to look like. In fact, I'm getting mine redone as we speak to make it more user friendly and a little bit better like Sharon's because she's just a role model to me. But before we leave, before we close, just kind of more generically, what do you think that any one of us can do to make a positive difference when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility in the drone, UAS, and AAM industry?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, you got to firmly believe where you are. So just like we did our benchmark study, where are you starting? And if you're a leader, if you're a CEO, if you're a board member, it starts with you. To make change, it starts at the top because that's where the culture is set. And so I would say, what do you need to do internally? Look in that mirror and take an honest look at your organization and say, how can I make a difference? And contact us, let us work with you. I mean, we collectively, between our three organizations, yours, Don, and Women in Drones, and Marlene's out of Canada, we can really help you understand and get your arms around where exactly is the state. I mean, it's one thing to look around and say, okay, we've only got 5% of our workforce that's diverse, whether you're looking at women or whether you're looking at other opportunities for diversity. Where do you start? What is your goal? In fact, one of the companies I like to hold up as an example is HP. They have publicly stated that by 2030, they plan on being at 50-50 parity for diversity and equity at all levels of their organization, including leadership. That's a massive statement for a major company in this country.
That it is a massive statement. I mean, look, this Airspace Link doing great things. I feel like they're at 60% of their leadership team is female, and I know you recognize them as the diversity exemplar this year as part of the Women to Watch program. And I just wrote a piece about U.S. drone soccer that is baking diversity, equity, inclusion right into the start of their culture of that company, and the fact they went to Africa and had a tournament with 8 teams, had to be girl led, had to be led by girls. Think about that. I mean, wowza. So lots of great companies doing amazing things out there. But Sharon, you're absolutely right. This is not an HR issue. This is not a political correctness issue. This is an industry viability issue. And as you said, one word to sum it all up, spoiler alert, everyone, it's leadership, period, in every sense of that word. So more to follow on that. Thank you so much because totally agree. Got maybe 30 seconds, Sharon, to give your kind of closing elevator speech before we do a couple announcements about what to expect tomorrow on Clubhouse and next week. Floor is yours.
Okay, great. So a couple of things else we're looking at. We're looking at having a Women in Drones Africa conference. We're working with a strategic partner over there. So that is something that I know a host of women here in the States was saying, oh my God, if you guys are going to Africa, we want to be there. Women to watch, we're getting calls daily or emails daily saying, when is it coming out? Stay tuned. We're working heavily with CES, trying to pull all our ducks in a row for that. And more importantly, if you're interested in becoming a member, go to womenandrones.com, or if you just want to connect with me directly, Sharon at womenandrones.com. Thank you, Dawn, for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Sharon. This was awesome. And look forward to watching Women in Drones continue to grow and our presence as a sector, as a power group in this industry continue to grow. On that note, we're talking about diversity all month long, and tomorrow we actually have on Clubhouse Rob Corbett, United States Air Force veteran, disabled vet, and quadriplegic who's made it his life's mission to advocate for inclusive and accessible flight. So please join us tomorrow, Drone Law Connections Clubhouse, 1 p.m. Eastern, and then Rob will be on this podcast next week as a Volatus Aerospace Above and Beyond series guest. So thank you again, Volatus, and thank you, Iris, for this whole month. Really appreciate you and everything you're doing out there in this space. That is all she wrote. Everybody have a wonderful remainder to your week. We are out here, and for those pilots that are out there, fly safe.